I don't think you can equate ambition with the amount of time that you work. It's more about what you end up focusing on and what your priorities end up being. So even when you think about priorities, and this is a lot of the work that I do with clients right now too, is being really clear on your priorities in life, but also in your priorities at the job. Because as you get higher in the ranks, you're going to have more that you're going to be responsible for, but it doesn't mean that you have to do more. And I think the strongest leaders that I've seen tend to really be diligent about prioritizing what they focus their energy on.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers or build a business while nurturing relationships and family. I'm Diane Mocha, founder and CEO of the Mom Sub app, the childcare app that connects you to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Each week, we meet a woman who has done that. And today, I'm with Nandhini Sundaram. She helps women in leadership quiet their inner critic and feel in control again without stepping away from their careers. She's a former agency executive turned burnout recovery coach. Thanks for being here, Nandhini.
Thanks for having me, Diane. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I see you worked in advertising agencies for about 20 years in many different media planning roles, and eventually you moved up to senior VP positions. So
Yeah.
I want to know, did you aspire to get to the C-suite and run into any kind of glass ceiling? And what do you think has been the biggest challenge in your career, specifically because you are a woman?
Yeah, great questions. So I think when I entered advertising, it was always about the fun aspect of the job because it's always so creative. And even on the media side, there are elements of it where you really get to kind of work on your creative side and think of creative ways to connect with consumers, right? And so that's what really connected me to the job and got me excited about the job. I think it was in terms of like getting to the SVP level, I don't think I ever had those aspirations, if I'm being honest. It was always just about let me keep growing, let me keep learning, let me keep building up my skill set. And I eventually got to that level where I was leading teams and, being involved in more strategic conversations and all that stuff was great. But the higher you rise, the more responsibilities you start taking on. And I think each time that happened and more was added to my plate, I just kept feeling like, okay, I just have to handle more. I just have to handle more until eventually it just got to be too much. And I think at the time, and I want to say this was probably like 10, 15 years ago, I don't think a lot of people were talking about burnout at the time. And so I just felt like I was the only one who was experiencing it and that I just kind of had to figure out a way to either survive or find a job that could be a little less demanding. So it was a long journey. And I know, in fact, that a lot of women kind of experience that journey as well of there's so much on my plate, there's so much that I have to do. You feel like you have no control over the situation. But the reality is you do. And it took me a really, really long time to figure that out, to eventually like take back control and to have more agency over my life and over my schedule and over my energy. So that's what I learned over time. It took me a very long time to figure that out, and now I'm blessed that I get to help other women figure that out as well.
So there's a lot of talk right now on LinkedIn, especially among women who are commenting on this new Lean In report that talks about the ambition gap. I have not read the report
Mhm.
myself. I've seen a lot of headlines and a lot of comments. And the general sense I get is people were pretty disappointed, at least the communities that I follow, that Lean In is supposed to be supportive of women. And they're basically saying, listen, there's this ambition gap between what men want and go for and
Mhm.
achieve, and then what women want and go for, and eventually, achieve or don't achieve. And so it was sort of encouraging women to be more ambitious. And the original Lean In book, which I read many years ago when it first came out, talked about this idea of lean into your career early when you don't have so many obligations and responsibilities and all these other things in life, and really take on a lot so you can get to those higher levels and be the one who is making the policies so the men aren't controlling the narrative. And so I don't know if this is a lot different than that, but saying women aren't ambitious because they're not showing up the same way at work, I think is a mistake. I don't know if it specifically said that, but I think a lot of people interpreted that way.
Yeah.
Just because you're not the first one in the morning and the last one to leave at night doesn't mean you're not leaving early, dropping the kids off, at school and activities, and then after they go to bed, coming back and doing more work. Or maybe you're 10 times more efficient than the guy who's working more hours. You found a
Yeah.
way to sort of integrate it all. Who's to say that more hours is necessarily more productivity? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you say you weren't really that ambitious, if you think that is something that's inherent in women, and is it more a protection of our own self-care, which maybe men
Mhm.
should do, right? They don't live as long. And let's talk about some of that because it's a very common discussion right now that's going on
Yeah.
in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And when I say I wasn't ambitious, I think it was always about the title, right? I wasn't ambitious about the title and getting up to the C-suite. It was really just about wanting to do good work. Like that was always my initial goal. But I think everyone has their ambitions. It's just about identifying what they want to be ambitious in. And so some people, men and women included, want to be ambitious in their job and want to rise up and really want to kind of show their authority and their skill set and their capabilities at work. It doesn't always mean that you have to work more than 10, 15 hours a week, right? Like you can get it all done probably in an 8-hour day. Many people do. So I don't think you can equate ambition with the amount of time that you work. It's more about what you end up focusing on and what your priorities end up being. So even when you think about priorities, and this is a lot of the work that I do with clients right now too, is being really clear on your priorities in life, but also in your priorities at the job. Because as you get higher in the ranks, you're going to have more that you're going to be responsible for, but it doesn't mean that you have to do more. And I think the strongest leaders that I've seen tend to really be diligent about prioritizing what they focus their energy on. And so if your goal is to ultimately get to the top of this pyramid and really like showcase all of your capabilities and really lead the whole company, that's great. But that is your focus and that is your aspiration, and that's what you should be going after. Everything that you do should be laddering up to that. But for some people, it's just about doing great work, or for others, it could be just about creating a great experience for their family. And so the job is a conduit to that. So I think it's about being really clear on what you're aspiring for, and what you're ambitious for, and being really clear and setting the priorities that will get you there. But I think ambition, everyone has that ability to be ambitious. We're all ambitious in different ways. It's just about what you're going to be ambitious for.
So you're serving a lot of women. Do you find, like you, that women are not as focused on the titles? And do you think in
Hmm.
corporate America and in terms of women, eventually getting parity with men in terms of,
Yeah.
wages and responsibilities, that maybe that's a misstep to not think about those things, even if they're not important to a person, because they're important maybe to an organization or to society at whole.
Yeah. I mean, I think women are just as care just as much about titles as men do. I don't have any stats to show that it would be the opposite. I think we want to be valued in the same way. I think we want to show or know that we are capable, and sometimes having that title is that way to have that recognition for it. So I wouldn't say that women are less ambitious than men or don't want that title. Absolutely not, right? Especially in the advertising industry, there are a lot of women in that industry, and there are a lot of ambitious women in that industry. And now we're starting to see a lot of female leaders as well, which is fantastic. So I don't think it's that women are less ambitious or don't want the title. It's just that we have to be better at balancing different things. Instead of taking everything on, we have to be willing to delegate. We have to be willing to prioritize. And we have to be willing to ask for help, which we're not always great at.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a difference, I think, between men and women. And I've seen that in my own business. So I have a business where we help parents take on the challenge of searching and finding and managing and keeping good childcare. And
Yeah.
it's a process and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it distracts you from the other things in life, like your children. And I find that when men hear about our service, and the cost, which is very reasonable for middle class families, that's a no-brainer to them. Like they're like, oh yeah, we need help with this and you can do it, great.
Yeah.
Here's the payment. And women, well, I've got to talk to my husband and I've got to think about this, and I kind of, my neighbor has somebody, maybe I'll talk to them first, as
Mhm.
opposed to, well, you can send them our way. Like we'll help you evaluate all the options, and we'll just take that 30 hours and we'll cut it down to like just spend 1 hour watching 5 videos, and there's your
Yeah.
choice. And so women are hesitant to delegate, especially things that they feel like, I should handle this. This is my responsibility. They're hesitant to give up that control, like somehow if something goes wrong, then it's going to be their fault.
Mhm.
And I think they tend to be a little more perfectionistic. And I think some of it is the nurturing that women may have naturally of like, we've got to take care of everything and everyone. And
Yeah.
so I do see a difference in how women are comfortable with delegating. And with delegating comes prioritizing, saying, this is the most important thing I need to do, and all those other things somebody else can do. And so it sounds like you're seeing that. And what do you do to help women? And do you feel like there's a little gap there where women need to achieve parity with men in that comfort of delegating and then eventually getting good at it, right? Because the more you do something, the better you get at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like there's the thought that, or the belief that if you're not focused on it, then you're going to be seen as lazy or that you don't care enough, right? And so part of the work that I do is helping to reframe the idea of what you need for yourself and why it's important to start taking care of yourself. Because I mean, I'm sure you would agree when you're not feeling your best, when you're not kind of fully rested and taking care of yourself, you're not being your best, right? Around people and the work that you're contributing. And so when you think about it in that way of taking care of yourself so that you can bring your best self to the people who really care about you and the work that you really care about, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, that means I can't do all of this stuff. So what are the things that I have to be involved in? What are the things that I'm okay with it not being perfect and someone else can handle? And what am I okay with just giving up altogether because it's not necessary and we'll be just fine without it, you know?
And
And
do
so
you
it's
think
reframing. Yeah.
when it comes to delegating, do you
Yeah.
think that people should look at what's my skill set, focus on my superpowers, don't worry about trying to build new skills and be everything to everyone, focus on what I enjoy and feel passionate about, let go of those things that like, like me and financial reports. It's like, can I
Yeah.
get somebody else to handle that?
Yeah.
Or do you think sometimes, you hear both, right? Like you should keep building up your skills. You shouldn't only do what you're good at or passionate about. Or do you find that hanging on to those things are best, or maybe hanging on to the things where, I will have the most impact, which isn't necessarily the things that you're the most passionate about. I don't like sales, but I'll have the most impact if I go to the client meeting and they
Yeah.
they see, my leadership. So what do you recommend to these women?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think it's really getting clear on the intention, right? And what is the value of keeping certain responsibilities to yourself? So, in the example of work, if you've got a team that you can delegate to, sure, you've got the skills to do something, but it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. And could you give it away to someone else so they can gain the skills and give you back time that only you can do? So I think there's like two aspects when you're trying to define what stays with you. One is, does it really matter to you? Does it energize you when you do it? And does it connect back to your values and to your priorities? And then the second is it going to help you move forward? Is it going to help with your own growth? And is it something that only you can do, right? Which is there aren't many things that only an individual can do. So it kind of takes some of that pressure off.
So it's also then, I would imagine, about defining what your goals and dreams are, so then you know what your priorities are, so then you know what to take and put in the delegation bucket and what to
Absolutely.
keep.
Yeah.
So you can think, frame everything and think about it in terms of, is this moving me closer to my ultimate goal? So let's talk a little about your ultimate goal and your journey, because your ultimate goal was obviously not to be a burnout coach and to
Yeah.
experience burnout yourself. But the reason
Right.
people go into coaching oftentimes is because they experience something traumatic themselves and then they get through it and want to help others who they
Yeah.
see are going through the same thing. So tell me a little about this great career you had and all these great responsibilities and this
Sure.
creative work you loved, and then why did you hit burnout? What were you not doing in your life? Didn't you not have a relationship? Were you losing touch with your friends? Did you want a soulmate and you weren't spending the time to find that person? And then how did you really realize that you were going through burnout, and what did you do?
Yeah, yeah. It was a long journey to figure out that I was even getting to burnout, but I think what what was my challenge at least, and what I see with a lot of clients too, is that when you're really good at what you do and the work that you do, it's easy to neglect the things that don't come easy to you. So for me, like work was very easy for me. Relationships and personal life stuff it was somewhat easy, but it was a lot harder. Like it wasn't as easy as doing well. And like when you're doing well at work, you don't know when you're doing really well at, in personal things. And so for a really long time, I was just focused on work because I knew it was doing well. I got relationships from it, friendships and stuff and peer relationships, which was great. And I got recognition and value in that space. But after, I would say like probably at the midpoint of my career, I started spending too much time at work, and it wasn't even like 15 or 16 hours. It was just, 12 hours instead of the 8 hours, which is still a lot of time, but it didn't leave time for anything else. And I think that initial drain of not having connection to my interests, not having any like proper social connection, not having proper time for rest, all of that started to contribute to this wear and tear of my own energy and depletion of energy. And like I said, I didn't really notice it at first. It just kind of felt like by the end of the week on Fridays, I was just exhausted. And I would use the rest of the weekend to recharge for the next week ahead. So it was really just about resting, sleeping, doing chores, that kind of thing. So again, not much outside of work, unfortunately. But then over time, I started to experience physical symptoms that I couldn't really equate to anything else, right? So random lower back pain that there would be no reason for it because wasn't doing anything different. Or during extreme periods of stress, I would suddenly have like bouts of eczema, either on my lips or when it was really bad last time, it was all over my upper torso. And I knew that was a point where like my body was telling me something was off and I couldn't continue at this pace anymore. Something needed to change. So I first took time off. I didn't really know what else to do. I thought maybe I'll just search for different jobs that might be less demanding. Um, Long story short, when I did move to a job that was supposedly less demanding, they ended up giving me more work anyway, and I didn't know how to say no or set those boundaries. So I just ended up burning out again. But then when I took 6 months off, like it was a great time off and it was recharging, and I got to reconnect to all my interests again and feel like myself again, which I had kind of forgotten for a really long time. But I couldn't figure it out what my next path would be. And I also reminded myself of how much I loved my job to begin with. Like I actually did really like the kind of strategic work that I got to do in advertising. So I ended up going back to the job after 6 months off, and
The same job, the one where
same job,
you
same
weren't
company,
putting
just
up
different account.
boundaries.
Yep, yep, yep. But I just thought I would do it temporarily. I'm just going to do it and try to retire early, which is not a great mindset to have because life is just too short. And I had to experience someone really close to me passing away at a young age to finally acknowledge how short and precious our life is, and that we don't have a guaranteed number of days or years. So instead of waiting and trying to push through and get through until I can retire, I want to make the most of the days that I've got. So that's what ended pushing me towards finding a solution to this so that I wouldn't keep burning out and actually wanting to enjoy the days that I was living instead of pushing through. So I ended up partnering with a coach myself because I couldn't figure it out on my own. I didn't know what was holding me back. And that's when I started to uncover, the things like that I was avoiding with the personal life and what I needed more of in my life, the things that really kind of brought me joy and energized me. And also giving myself permission to say no because I didn't think that I had that permission, right? So it was all about kind of uncovering those things for myself that I now fortunately get to help other women do as well.
So a
So it's a long journey, but it
self-awareness
was good.
journey
It
is correct.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to talk about that 6 months off. You know, you went to your boss and said you needed a sabbatical, a disability. How did you arrange that? Were you really truly gone? Almost like a maternity leave, but you didn't have children. You told me
Yeah.
earlier you don't have children, but how did you arrange that? Did you always know you had an on-ramp to come back on? Were you W-2 and then you were paused and then you came back? I think
Yeah.
people would be very curious, and you had enough saved that you felt comfortable financially. How did that work?
Yeah. So it was around my birthday. I think I had turned around 35 or something. And I just couldn't do the job anymore. I had no motivation. I really dreaded going to work every single day, something that I hadn't experienced for most of my careers, right? So it was a new feeling. And I just knew that I had to create some sort of change. I didn't know what that change was. So I thought, let me just take some time off. I did look at my savings to see how much I could, afford, how much time I could take off. So I did all those calculations for myself. But my intention at the time was actually to leave the company altogether, leave advertising and try to find a different career because I just felt like this career I couldn't handle. I didn't have the right capacity and energy for it like some other people do. Because remember, no one was talking about it. So I thought it was a me problem, um, which in hindsight, it kind of was because I wasn't acting in a way that was right for myself. But in any case, it was around March. I ended up having a conversation with my boss a couple of weeks later once I kind of solidified my savings and how much time I could take off. And I told him, I actually just gave him notice, like I was going to be leaving. And he understood my situation. He understood the burnout, and was actually quite supportive of it. And he even offered, like, take a month off, see how you feel. If you want to come back, you can come back. So it was a very kind of supportive conversation. But I was gone for 6 months. I took the full 6 months. And then the agency that I had left happened to win a new account when at the end of the 6 months. And so that's when I knew, okay, well, maybe you can try to get on that team because they're going to be looking for people. And lo and behold, they were. So it was easy for me to go back. But really, I had no intention of going back at the time.
So you created your own business as a coach,
Yeah.
and that in and of itself comes with a whole lot of burnout potential. I know as a serial
Yeah.
entrepreneur. So how long ago was that you created this business? How easy or difficult was it to get clients, to actually make enough money to pay the bills, to eventually, if you're even there yet, make enough to replace or exceed what you were earning before? Have you given yourself like a timeline and a runway for that? And even though you control your schedule more when you work for yourself, your
Yeah.
work is always there. And maybe with some companies your work is there, but it's still them. Now it's you. So
Yeah.
are you finding that you've replaced one set of stress with a different set of stress?
Um, I don't think so. Like, yes, there are times when I'm stressed out in this job, but I'm so passionate about it that and it's so aligned with my values and my purpose that it just feels more energizing than it does depleting. And so that was actually the big driver of me switching careers and starting a business on my own is once I started doing the deeper work and uncovering my values, uncovering my purpose, I realized it was a bit of a disconnect from what I was doing in advertising and that I needed to make a shift. So it was a bit of time for me to explore what that shift would be. And so this is where I landed. But it was about a couple of years ago that I initially started the business and started kind of working part-time while I was still or doing this part-time while I was still working full-time in advertising. Um, and it's been slowly growing. It's been a big learning journey for sure, and there's still growth to be done, right? Because I'm still early in this process. But you're right, the challenge of burnout, potentially just overdoing it and leaning in too much and not giving yourself enough a break was definitely there. But I luckily knew the signs of when I was like approaching that point, and I knew when I needed to pull back and give myself permission to pull back too. And I think it's also about resetting because when you're working in a 9 to 5, especially in a corporate space, there's so much structure and you have to like make your life work within that structure. But when you're doing it on your own, you have full flexibility. And so now it's about recreating what that structure looks like for you, which was scary in the beginning. And really, it was just like, I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know how to create a schedule for myself. And so it was a lot of trial and error. But I finally kind of figured out what the right schedule is, what the right kind of workload is, and how much I could feasibly take on versus overdoing it and trying to recreate a 9 to 5, which honestly isn't really necessary in our world. So yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve, but it feels good to finally have that balance and to be in charge of that balance.
Congrats. And
Yeah.
are you profitable? Are you making as much as you were in the corporate world?
Yeah, not yet, not yet.
It's
But that was
hard. It's really
it's
hard.
hard. It is hard, but
Yes.
that was also one of the things that made me realize it was one of the questions I asked myself of would I be okay with it, right? If I wasn't making as much. And my initial thought was, yes, I would just lower my cost of living. What I do is so much more important than how much I'm going to be making. So that's when I knew it was the right pivot to make. Um, would I love to make more? Absolutely. But I'm good where I am now, and I'm just kind of taking it day by day, month by month, and just learning and growing as much as I can. So my aspirations now, it's not about getting to a certain level or honestly even getting to a certain monetary limit or point. But it's just trying to help as many people as I can. Like that is my aspiration.
So tell me about your self-discovery and some of the personal things that were missing when you were working 12 hours a day, spending every weekend just kind of catching up on chores and errands and not
Yeah.
really experiencing, like you said, the things that brought you joy. Did you, during those years, especially during the burnout, did you have an intimate relationship? Did you want one? Did you, put in effort for that either before or after you kind of realized some of this? And what were some of the other things in life that you were neglecting? Give me some specifics.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the first thing is I was neglecting friendships and family relationships, and always coming up with the excuse, well, work is just too busy. I don't have time for that. And so I always ended up putting it last, and in some cases lost some friendships, which was a bummer. But recently I've also started kind of reconnecting with a lot of those people too. So I will say, even if you feel like a relationship is over and it's just been too much time, there's always a chance, right? Just give yourself that chance and give them a chance too. So I think that was one thing is the relationships that I had just started to weaken a bit because I wasn't investing in them. I think romantically, it was also an excuse because dating is hard and it takes a lot of energy. And who loves being on the apps? I certainly didn't. So saying like I was just too busy for that and really leaning into the work was my replacement for the romantic stuff, unfortunately. And now like I'm absolutely open to it. I think it's still not a fun aspect of life, of dating in general, right? I don't think the apps make it any easier. But I'm open to it and I have a lot more energy for it. And I think the other thing is when you have more energy, and like I said, when you're taking care of yourself to bring your best self forward, like I have the patience to connect with people. And as an introverted person, it takes a lot of energy for me to connect with people that I'm not close to. So I think being able to, protect my energy to recharge myself when I need to lets me connect with others, but in a way that I wasn't able to when I was overworking. So I think relationship wise was definitely the biggest challenge when I was working too hard in the advertising world. But I think the other things that I was missing are I didn't have any hobbies. I lost a lot of the hobbies that I had when I was younger, like painting and, going to museums was something I really enjoy. Listening to music was stuff that I really enjoyed and that recharged me, but I just didn't have any time for that. I didn't have time to be outside, right? So like even my vitamin D depletion was it was so low. And it started to change my mood and like all of these other physical aspects were really impacted by it too. So I don't know, it kind of touched every aspect of my life. It wasn't just one. Unfortunately, it was all of them.
Mm. It makes me so sad when I hear you say, it's so hard to be on the apps and I know, everyone is gonna feel differently, but you just hear that, I mean, I have Gen Z kids and I hear that from them
Yeah.
and just that it's almost something that you dread and it's like another thing on your list that you put down. In my era, I met people just by socializing and doing the
Right.
things I love to do and people were more sociable and went out and did more things and didn't stay home, staring at screens and I'm no expert, but I feel like the more you go out and do things you enjoy, the more likely you meet other people doing those things. But you gotta like look up, interact, say the
Yeah,
first hello, put yourself out there, I
that's
think, there
exactly
was
it.
always this idea back in the day that like, oh, men got used to a lot of rejection because they would ask a lot of women out and but now I think it kind of goes both ways, women as well as men can ask each other out and get used to rejection because like business you're probably not afraid or nervous or feel terrible if you reach out to somebody as a coaching client and they decline you. You're
Right.
disappointed, but it's not gonna crush you. But people feel so differently when it's a person that they might have a romantic interest. Oh my gosh, is it me? Is it how I look? Should I not have worn that
Yeah.
dress that day? Is it what I said? Should I not? And then I think over analyzing and there's other ways to look at it. And not that that's the be all end all, but and everyone's different in what their priorities are in life. But I wonder if it's something that you've thought about. If your family asks you, where are you from?
Yeah.
And what is your family's feeling? Do they say, when are you going to meet a nice boy? When are you going to get married? Are you ever going to have kids? What are your thoughts on those things? And how much pressure do you feel from society and family when it comes to those things?
Diane, have you talked to my mom? I feel
I
like
am
she's
a
probably
mom.
seeded this with you. No, so my heritage is Indian. My parents emigrated here 50 years ago, actually, a little over 50 years ago. So it's been a while. I grew up here though. And of course, like they've been asking about and hoping that I would get married like since I was in my 20s, right? So it's been a while. But I think at this point they accept where I am right now. And they're also they're they want to make sure that I'm happy, whoever I end up with, right? And so I don't have to settle. They don't want me to settle. I certainly don't want to settle. And so I think I hope, I think that they're okay with where I am right now. But I think your point about making the first connection and being a little outgoing is absolutely right. And I will say, even when I started the outreach for my job and trying to connect with people online as potential client prospects, like in the beginning, that wasn't easy either. Every rejection felt personal in the beginning, right? And then over time, you start to become immune to it a little bit, and it's just kind of part of the process. And I think to your point, like that has to happen socially too. You just got to keep putting yourself out there so that it doesn't kind of impact you. You don't take it as personally when someone doesn't respond in the way that you want them to. So it is a fair point. I think we've all got to be better about connecting with others and making the first move, whether it's for friendship or just like, romantic relationships or whatever, even just a casual acquaintance, whatever it is. But I think we could all use a little more connection these days.
And sometimes it starts as one and moves into another. My husband and
True. That
I,
is
we
true.
have, we have a 25 and a 22-year-old. We've been together, for all those years, and we started as friends.
Yeah.
and then became really close friends and then got romantically involved. So you never know how things are gonna evolve. And we had a lot of common interests and we're starting to, we're doing some of the same things. So
Yeah.
I wonder as you're, consulting and coaching these various clients, if the career and the personal life and all these things we've talked about today are intertwined in how you're advising them and how these things that you're guiding them on, how they influence you if you're taking away a little something from every person that you're coaching. And what are you seeing as the recurring themes that people are really struggling with and how you helping them get past those?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, uh, overcoming burnout is a holistic approach, right? It's not just about limiting the number of hours that you work and having a little bit more rest, but it's making sure that you are really living a fully balanced life and that you are kind of hitting on all the different aspects of your life that really recharge you. And I think part of that is defining what balance actually looks like, identifying the things that do refuel you, and recharge you. And then from there, like I mentioned before, kind of identifying what your priorities are. What are the things that you really want to be focusing on? And what are the things that you can start letting go? So it is a kind of a fluid process. It's something that you should be thinking about all the time. It's not a one and done, but as life changes, as you change, you should be reevaluating that too. The other aspect of the burnout process, and actually I should just kind of talk about the four-part process. So when I work with clients, I created a resilience blueprint, and it hits on the four main drivers of burnout. One is lack of balance, which we kind of talked about, seems pretty obvious. The second is about the fears that we tend to have about other people's perceptions of us and what other people are going to think, because that's a big driver of what keeps us overworking and overdoing and leaning in all the time, right? It's always thinking about what other people think. That's where people pleasing kind of comes into play, perfectionism comes into play. So, like, that is a big driver of burnout as well. And it's something that I work through with my clients in the program. The third is not having enough reward for the work that you're doing. And it's not just about financial reward, it's more meaningful rewards, things like growth and development, could be connection, it could be knowing that you're contributing to the team, to society, to the company in a bigger way, right? And over time in your career, especially for mid-career professionals, that reward might be declining a bit because you've been in it for so long. You're not learning as much, you're not getting new experiences, right? So lack of reward is a third. And then the fourth is lack of alignment with your values and your purpose. And a lot of times when you're not clear on your values and your purpose, you follow the values and purpose of other people, of other companies, which may be in conflict with you. And so that creates an internal stress too. And that, like I mentioned before, that was a big driver of me actually leaving advertising and switching careers and building this business, is because advertising just wasn't aligned with my own personal values, right? So it's really working through all four of those big buckets. Some are going to have bigger challenges in one area versus another, but really it's making sure that every individual's kind of has that. We're evaluating the impact across all four and overcoming the challenges across all four as well.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a journey to have gone through all that and then gotten to the point where you can create a framework that others can use in a very specific way. So you've learned so much about yourself and just the way all of us sort of interact with the four pillars that you talked about. And I wonder if you could go back to an earlier version of yourself, knowing then what you know now, what would you change?
Ooh, oh. Um, I think the first thing I would tell my younger self is you don't have to say yes all the time. You can say no. So when they say, here's another account for you to work on, you can say, well, actually, I can't do that unless whatever it is, I get more support, unless I give something else away. Like, have that negotiation, have that conversation. Just don't just take it and say, sure, no problem, like I was. So I think that's probably the first one. And then the second big thing, which I'm a little bit embarrassed about, but I will say anyway, it's that realizing people pleasing is not good for you. It's not a positive thing. And for my whole life, I had always thought it was actually a good attribute to have, because why wouldn't you want to kind of think about and care about what other people are thinking? But Like I mentioned before, when you're always putting other people first, you're going to end up putting yourself last, and that's just going to drain your energy. And it's also an inauthentic way to live because you are, or I was, always trying to appease others at the expense of my own authenticity and honesty and doing what's right for me. So I think those are the two things that I would raise with my younger self is it's okay to say no. Please, please, please say no. And don't be so worried about what other people think and trying to appease everyone else because it's ultimately an impossible act anyway.
And people pleasing doesn't mean you can't be polite and
Correct.
respectful and
Right.
kind and all of those things, and even sensitive of being aware of something that might be offensive to somebody else. But it means not sacrificing your own desires because you're putting somebody else's before your
Absolutely.
own.
Yeah. And actually, there's a big difference between being nice and being kind, which I didn't realize. Like, nice, which is associated with people pleasing, is when you're trying to appease everyone else, often at the expense of yourself, versus being kind is it's doing what's right, even if it makes the other person upset. So even giving feedback, right? If you have to give negative feedback, it might be the right thing to do, the kind thing to do to help that person grow, but you might be afraid to do it because it's going to get them upset, in which case you, as a people pleaser, you might avoid having that conversation with them, right? So it's a very kind of your intentions are the same, but how you deliver on it two very different ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great takeaways for our viewers and listeners. And I thank you, Nandini, for all
Yeah.
these insights you revealed on today's episode of Women and Work. If you were inspired by today's story, remember to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. If you or anyone you know is struggling to find the right childcare, check out MomSub's free webinar that guides families through the steps to find and keep trusted, reliable childcare at momsub.com/webinar. That's momsub, like a substitute mom. You can also connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Our mission is for you to discover what you want in life, like Nandini does. Pursue it with intensity. Reach out for help when needed and learn to delegate, right? And fulfill your dream. That's going to reduce your stress, your guilt, and your self confidence and increase your calm, your confidence, and clarity along the way. So remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. Keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.